would deliver a result that would take the edge off the disease, and I began to focus on curcumin 3. So I isolated it, took it out.
Right.
And I began to study it intensely to map the pharmacology. Now, the interesting thing is that, we have all these botanicals in the marketplace, and if we use curcumin as the model, they have multiple constituents in them that create this polypharmacology. So this massive pharmacology that hits a lot of different targets in the body. And the holistic approach states, and the philosophy solidifies, that this holistic system is required. You need to target multiple proteins that are naturally created by nature to target our natural system in a way that's synergistic. Now, in allopathic medicine, the medical community, that's mainstream medicine today, says, no. We don't want polypharmacology. We want selected pharmacology that targets one protein. And there's validity to that. The reason is that we are better able to control that pharmacology. We know there's less likelihood of adverse events with other drugs because it's selective. So I began to really study the pharmacology delivered by the pharmaceutical industry to determine, how can we leverage what they have done, but still maintain the holistic value of our technology to be able to be accepted in mainstream medicine, so that we can deliver this technology to the broader public globally without having to fight through the sludge of allopathic medical resistance. And so I became an island for 10 years. And the island was, I used the pharmaceutical drug research to study each of these different components in the curcumin, 3 curcuminoids. I mapped the pharmacology thoroughly. We had medical discoveries. They've been published in peer-reviewed medicine. And the discovery showed why this was working for me. And once you know what each of these components do, you can actually re-engineer the final product to be more selective for a protein that you want to target, while maintaining the underpinnings of the holistic compounds that are required.
So basically what you're saying is you're taking pharmacology and blending it with holistic, and you're using the principles of both to deliver a result.
To deliver now a result that is reliable. So what we've said is, the philosophy of Biologic is, look, we have all looked at natural compounds as effective ways to treat the body, to treat disease, to treat human being with disease. The problem is, it's not reliable. And it's true. The reason is that we have standardized, if you use the model, we have standardized curcumin as the 95%. Well, we need to go in and standardize by each constituent, because if they change, then the pharmacology changes. Because each constituent, although they have a similar biological structure, there are differential features to that structure that render and allow that molecule to have slightly different level of activity. So now what we've done is standardize the proportions of the curcumin. And we've locked in the proportion of curcumin 3 that we know inhibits a protein called MSK1, which is dysregulated in a lot of autoimmune conditions, cancers, and things like that. And when you regulate MSK1 and bring it back to its normal functioning state, then the inflammatory cascade functions more effectively. Now, the cool thing is that we took this model. We were very effective with curcumin, because the power curc is made with the curcumin bio-BDMC that we I guess technologized, is like I like to put it.
It's technology.
Yeah.
It's very unique technology. It's not regular curcumin. We had to work with Health Canada for 2.5 years to develop new monographs, new approval processes for something that they weren't familiar with. And we've come such a long way. We've shown now with Health Canada that's now approved as an over-the-counter. We've gone to a 50% for the medical community, because it has a more potent effect on MSK1 for diseases that might have other features that are very difficult to deal with. We can't talk too much about disease specificity, but what we've been able to achieve with Health Canada is that we have a powerful anti-inflammatory agent we can claim is an anti-inflammatory agent. And now we've shown Health Canada that variants of this technology that are way more potent than even the over-the-counter are effective, well, let me just say this, that are great candidates, as Health Canada has put it after reviewing all our research at Biologic, great candidate drug for the treatment of COVID. And we've seen it in our community already, where with COVID, a lot of the adverse events and the dangerous situations that occur with people who are infected occur because there's a predisposition for inflammation. There's an underlying subclinical inflammation because they might have other diseases such as autoimmune conditions, diabetes, things that raise the subclinical inflammatory activity. We've shown in the research that we can mitigate the inflammatory activity to bring it down to baseline activity so that once infected, and I say potentially, we could treat COVID and treat people who are in distress and at risk for morbidity and mortality with COVID. Now, when I talk about COVID, it's an exciting time because, well, first of all, people think, COVID's already past us. And the reality is that we have mutations of the virus itself, and these variants will come and continue to come and ravage society periodically. So we have something now that is going into a clinical trial for the treatment of people in distress based on, this is interesting though, based on the original research that shows it's a powerful anti-inflammatory and has been approved as an anti-inflammatory already. So we're very excited about that because this is not just about being authorized to go into a clinical trial, but it's about validation. Validation for the work we've been doing that has altered this curcumin from the originally accepted state to one that's at a higher level of functionality and is a hybrid of what we do pharmaceutically in the drug industry and holistically in the natural health space, which I've been in for 30 years. And I think it's about time that we bring a new level of credibility for the technologies in general in the natural health space that work. And the fact is, they work, but we just need a more sophisticated way to standardize them so that they're reliable and they work every time you take them, as opposed to a chance that the proportions of the inner underpinnings of these botanicals may work. We've now done this with ashwagandha, and ashwagandha is a different animal in itself, different plant in itself.
I love taking your ashwagandha.
Yeah, it's a great product.
I love it. Yes.
And ashwagandha, as opposed to curcumin having 3 curcuminoids, has 35 withanolides. So we've been navigating through that for the last 3 years, identifying each one, mapping the pharmacology of each one, and what we've found is phenomenal in terms of neutralizing reactive oxygen species, enhancing NRF2, which is a transcription factor in the cell that is responsible for manufacturing or transcribing glutathione peroxidase, superoxide dismutase, catalase. These are antioxidants inside the cell, not antioxidants we would take like vitamin C. That's what I call an outside-in therapy.
Exogenous versus endogenous.
Endogenous. So imagine that. As you age, the endogenous antioxidant load in your cell begins to decline, and you need it to neutralize the exhaust, such as the free radicals that occur when you're metabolizing nutrients and creating ATP.
I thought when I left LA, I became a free radical myself.
Yeah, well, I'm a free radical in my space.
Yeah.
That's
So a quick question here, because a lot of our users, a lot of our base is in the United States, the majority of it, and the rest of the world seems to focus on there. So what is the relationship of Health Canada compared to the FDA?
Well, it's said globally that to pass the stringent regulations in the Canadian program in for Health Canada is a real coup, because
Generally, they're stronger.
it's harder, much harder to pass it. So to give you an example,
Because that's the first thing people ask: is it FDA approved?
but FDA never approves anything.
Yeah, of course it is.
If you notice, it says here, the FDA hasn't approved this and it's not used for diagnosis or mitigation of disease and blah, 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 blah. Now, here's how it works. You can sell something in the US and the FDA will allow it if they haven't banned it. If they haven't banned it.
Yeah.
It's a different system. So this is what they call a negative system.
Exclusion versus inclusion in Canada.
In Canada, you're not allowed to sell anything unless they've approved it.
Yeah.
All right? So that's the difference.
So with all of this, there's lots of research, lots of science, and it's obvious that you're doing something completely new in the research and science space. How does that actually affect your mission, your vision? So, like, what is the overall global vision for you and your company and Biologic?
Well, since the beginning and after my personal experience, it's been to validate the technologies in the natural health space, or as I've said clearly, invalidate them if we can't find the science. Mm-hmm. Now, if we haven't found positive evidence in terms of pharmacological benefits to a disease pathology when we're studying this, we haven't found it. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because we're not the end all and be all. But we can't go ahead and make the claims for something that we expect is going to be functional if we haven't found what is making it functional. So, for example, I'm going to go back to the ashwagandha space, because we've all known that, curcumin is an anti-inflammatory. And it's been known the mechanism. It's NF-kappa B inhibition. There's a pathway which I studied in my PhD work, which was my central path of study, is the NF-kappa B signaling pathway. It's responsible for creating the cytokines that elicit the inflammatory response in the body. And there are approximately 150 genes that NF-kappa B transcription factor comes, if you know a little bit of biology, comes from the cytosol into the nucleus, into the DNA, opens up the promoter of the DNA, and transcribes these the messenger RNAs and
basically what you're saying is you're working on the operating system, not the applications.
Exactly. So we're affecting the operating system and down-regulating all the cytokines that are involved in beckoning and beaconing. They are being beacons for the immune system. And so by doing that, we're upstream of any one cytokine that represents the cytokine storm that we talk about in, say, for example, the COVID pathology. So in the COVID pathology, they're saying, hey, we need to neutralize interleukin-6, which is one cytokine. We're saying, wait a minute, the cytokine storm phenomenon is represented by multiple cytokines that create an exacerbated inflammatory response. Why not go upstream to the transcription factor, inhibit it, and now you inhibit the whole cloud?
So maybe let me ask you this. More so the how, why are you doing this? Like, what is the long-range goal for Biologica? I mean, are you looking to be like the biggest natural pharmacology in the world? Are you what is the goal? Like, why are you doing this?
If we become the biggest organization in the world that does what we do, that's great. That's not the goal. The goal is to just run to live and step through the journey of step by step, validating or invalidating these technologies so people have the knowledge.
Right. Okay. So basically, taking the way I see it is, because when I talk to you, I mean, I know a lot about the body, but I actually my brain can shut down when I talk to you. Because you're so smart about this stuff.
We have specialization and education in different areas.
Yeah, I get it. But it's more about what your vision is like for the world. I mean, you're doing this for a reason. You want to help the world in some capacity, and I think that's our mission. We're literally out there to help the world. And you said bringing education. The education and how things work has been actually hidden, or just not exposed enough. So so your plans to educate and do that is that something? Are you moving towards an education model?
We don't want to be functionally day-to-day educating. We want to be able to do the research that demonstrates efficacy and viability and how you can achieve that reliable efficacy. So here's our philosophy. If you go onto our website at Biologic Pharmamedical, you'll see that basically what we're trying to achieve is this. I believe that the medical practitioner of the future will treat the patient for disease starting from the least intrusive methodology to the most intrusive only when needed.
That's
now,
exactly our belief. Yeah. Because when we, like earlier we went through the fascial maneuvers with you, and we were doing organ reset, which effectively has the same net effect as acupuncture. But again, there's with less intrusion. So basically you're looking at the same thing. How do we create less intrusion for the greatest result? Yeah,
and in my case, because of the education and the passion and the experience I have in this arena and not in your arena, I'm saying, okay, I know the nutraceutical space for the last 30 years. I know what a lot of these substances do. Let's study the underpinnings of each of these botanicals, the constituents, to determine which one is doing it, so that we can standardize that constituent so that it's reliable every time. And so, so the doctor of the future will have studied naturopathic medicine as much as he studied allopathic medicine. And I say on two ends, this should be the same thing. Yeah. But right now, they're two ends of the spectrum. But it takes education in the medical community to be able to appreciate it. This is why I've gone down the path of studying these technologies using, people say, well, why use the pharmaceutical model? Because why reinvent the wheel? The medical practitioners have been taught to respect that model That is the model they're familiar with.
That's a good point.
Fine, I'll bring this in here, let's go. And you know what? I use your drugs as the positive control. For example, in the study we just did for an erectile dysfunction product, Viagra is the control, positive control, and we use a negative control. For the study that
Are
we
you
did,
saying you have an ED product
we
coming
do, and it works well.
Oh boy.
And
Hey, that's,
it works.
that's going to be a hard one to get into the market. The competition is really stiff.
It is stiff, yeah. But, okay, to give you another example, we've created a Lipitor analog for LDL management, right? Now, we used Lipitor as the standard and the positive control in the same study that was used by Pfizer, exactly modeled by them to show, hey, just as effective, dude.
That's ingenious.
So, and Lipitor, for people, a lot of people watching this aren't even understand what that is. But so, for Lipitor, we're talking about
Cholesterol management, right?
Right.